I'm reminded of something that Mike Tomlin would say a lot during the COVID time, whenever there was all kinds of uncertainty about when the team would play or whether or not this game was going to get postponed and everything else. He would just say, listen, they're going to tell us where to be. We're going to go there and we're going to play. That's it. Good morning to you. Good Thursday morning. I'm Dejan Kovacevic of DK Pittsburgh Sports. This is Daily Shot of Steelers. It comes your way bright and early every weekday. If you're into hockey and or baseball, I also offer daily shots of Penguins and Pirates in the same place that you found this. The NFL schedule was released last night, and the Steelers have what would appear to be a couple of significant challenges within that schedule. The first, at least depending on your perspective, is that 3 of their first 4 games are on the road. I don't think that's much of a factor, especially considering that the very first game in Atlanta will be basically a home game, as anybody who has attended Steelers games against the Falcons, including the one last preseason, can attest. This will not be friendly territory for the home team. It just won't. Second game is in Denver. There's the Russell Wilson factor. The NFL really knows what it's doing. The third week is finally the home opener. That'll be against the Chargers. Fourth week is in Indianapolis. That's going to be a real road game, just like the one in Denver will. And, okay, so they play 3 out of their first 4 games at home. What's the problem there? As I see it, and I've been talking about this a lot, my chief concern related to this entire football team is how quickly the offensive line gels. Well, go out there on the road, go into the most adverse circumstances you can face. Make sure that you've got everybody on the same page. Focus like crazy or you're going to get embarrassed. You're going to get exposed. And get that out of the way. Get it out of the way early. I'm all right with that. Also, and related, 3 of the next 4 games are at home. All this stuff balances out. Not a big deal. Challenge number 2, each time they face the Ravens, they have another game just 4 days later. Now, that's something that maybe somebody at the league office could have looked at and said, this seems kind of mean. But they didn't, and those are the circumstances. There's also a mentality, I would hope, that iron sharpens iron, and the Steelers would go into that Thursday game just having performed at a physical peak and taking it out on whoever it is that they face next. Although I say that, and the first team that lines up is Cleveland, and the second one is Kansas City on Christmas. So, yeah, it's a challenge, okay? That's challenge number 2. Challenge number 3 is that the second half of the season, in general, appears to be very tough, in part because all of the divisional games, you heard me right, all of the divisional games are in the second half. And sprinkled in among those divisional games are really tough matchups with the Chiefs and with the Eagles. But isn't that when you're supposed to be growing as a football team? Isn't that when you're supposed to be feeling that confidence, getting past that point? And let's use this as a fun line of demarcation. Getting past that point where somewhere Najee Harris pops off about how things aren't going great. And then all of a sudden, the entire offense shows up for work the following week and just knocks people's heads off. That's around that time of year. You notice that? Okay, so do that. Head into your divisional schedule. Head into your games against the Eagles and the Chiefs and just get better as a football team. My view on this as a whole is that this team, regardless of the order of its opponents, is going to have to be graded on a curve in the early going. There are way too many new parts, including the most important part, that being quarterback, including, again, the offensive line. And my goodness, how about a whole new offensive playbook? Anyone who thinks that stuff's all going to get sorted out in OTAs or in Latrobe or in preseason games is nuts. It's going to take, I think, and I've been saying this for a while, 4 to 6 weeks. Well, how about if in those 4 to 6 weeks, you don't play the hardest part of your schedule, and you maybe find a way to just scratch out some wins in that process while you're learning, while you're improving. And one last thought on this. They're going to play 17 games. They were always going to play 17 games. Okay? We knew who they'd be playing. We knew who was at home. We knew who was on the road. Nothing about this schedule alters any of that. The closest that anything comes to being an eyebrow raiser is the thing with the Ravens and having the games 4 days later. That's it. That's it. We knew all of the rest. We knew that they had the number 3 ranked strength of schedule, the toughest schedule, or toughest slate of opponents. The rest of this just smacks it on the calendar, you know? And can I throw one other thing into this? And this is probably not very cool because you should never wish for people to get injured and stuff. But generally speaking, when are you seeing a ton of backup quarterbacks around the NFL? Right, later in the season. Just saying, just throwing it out there. When we come back, J1Q. This segment of Daily Shot is brought to you by our good friends at Mike's Beer Bar. They're located on Federal Street, directly across from PNC Park. Mike has more than 500 beers on tap, including from more than 50 local breweries. Stop in and say hello. Tell Mike we sent you. Mike's Beer Bar. Today's J1Q comes from Rico, who says, DK, since when did the new season schedule become this big event? Just release the schedule, for God's sake. The NFL's penchant for self-promotion is disgusting to me. I can't stand all of this pomp and circumstance over something so trivial. I mean, I know it's a different era, but I don't like it. You know, Rico, it's really not that bad. The only part of it that I'll say that kind of grates on me is the piecemeal releases, you know, where they'll leak out to one of their various, you know, sycophants at ESPN or NFL Network or whatever, you know, who the Patriots are playing first or who this team has or what the date is for the game in Brazil. And it just goes out in these little fragments. And they do that on purpose because people who are in the news business, like myself, then have to commit a headline to each one of those things individually, as opposed to one big headline coming out last night that says, NFL schedule is here. There's now a whole bunch of them, and it dominates the discussion. And people then start putting together, you see this, their own team's schedule based on reports from other cities. Well, here they said that in Jacksonville that so-and-so is going to be there, so somebody backing out. You get the idea here. It becomes something that's, you know, a lot of fuss, but also it's fun. You've seen the videos that were made this year by the Chargers, last year by the Titans. Now, a bunch of teams tried, but those two really, really succeeded. Funny. They're almost borderline Hollywood productions in a couple of these cases. And they get people sharing and discussing. And if you're the NFL and you're this massive multi-billion-dollar annual business, part of what you have to do, since you only have those 17 regular season games, is make sure that the stuff that you do have in the off season is a really, really, really big deal. Look at how the NFL handles the draft. I mean, they've turned it into what was there, 750,000 people pressing against the stage in Detroit? And nothing actually even happens at a draft other than Roger, a podium, and a handful of hugs from the handful of players who bother to go and sit in the green room. Nothing even happens. And there's 750,000 people there, according to police estimates. That's nuts. That's nuts. They're good like that with free agency. They even have the non-tampering period of free agency that was thrown into this. So there's an additional handful of days before the actual free agency opens up. They're good at this. But I'll say it again, they have to be. The NHL has 82 games of a regular season and 2.5 months of Stanley Cup playoffs. They're in action pretty much 8 months a year. Major League Baseball, 162 games, 6 weeks of spring training, playoffs into November now is when the World Series gets completed. The NFL can't do that. It's a different sport. I'm sure they'd like to. I'm sure they're going to push really, really hard for that 18th game. But they don't have it. So they do it this way. And they do it really, really well, Rico. It's okay. It's okay, my man. I appreciate the question and the spirit. I appreciate everybody listening to Daily Shot of Steelers. And we're going to do another one of these tomorrow.